For some time, we've been saying that these food prices that have been soaring have been caused by the war in Ukraine, also raising the risk of famine around the world. Just how severe is the threat that's posed?
Well, the threat is quite severe. Ukraine is one of the bread baskets of the world, essentially, a major producer of grain, a major producer of wheat, and many countries globally depend on the Ukrainian grain production. At the moment, we have a situation here where there are more than 20 million tons of grain sitting in silos, and the silos are full, and we're looking at a new harvest in about a month's time. So unless this grain can be shipped out and exported, there'll be a crisis in the sense that there'll be no space to put the new harvest, essentially to reap the new harvest and put it in the silos. So a solution has to be found fairly quickly.
And what's the major hang-up in finding that solution at the moment?
Well, there are, I mean, I cannot really speak about the details of the talks, but there are efforts to unblock the situation in the Black Sea, which is the traditional route through which grain is exported from Ukraine. At the moment, that route is blocked, and the only option is essentially rail, which is not how traditionally this is done. So we hope that these efforts will lead to some sort of an understanding, some sort of an agreement that will allow for the situation to be essentially unblocked and for Ukrainian agricultural produce to be exported.
Yeah, and we're seeing a sort of multi-pronged problem here, aren't we? First of all, we have this grain that cannot be shipped, but then we also have several dozen countries themselves who have imposed controls like export restrictions or prohibitions. And this only exacerbates the problem, doesn't it? But how does one reason with a government to think of the world first and not its own people or voters?
Well, I mean, I cannot really speak about other countries. I mean, I'm primarily concerned with the situation in Ukraine, and of course, the possible shortages of food globally are, I would say, the sort of the silent peril, the silent side effect of this crisis in Ukraine. But our concern here primarily is, of course, the situation in Ukraine, and it's not just the situation with the grain, but also the general situation, which is extremely difficult at the moment. With we're about to essentially mark another grim milestone in a few days, with essentially 4 months since the Russian invasion on February 24th. This is really a very, I would say, somber and grim occasion. We have thousands of people dead. We have a quarter of the population uprooted, displaced. There isn't a single person in Ukraine whose life has not been somehow adversely affected by this. Every aspect of human activity has essentially been affected by the war. Everything: education, economy, health. People who have lost their loved ones, their friends, their relatives. It's a really very sad and I would say grim situation.
Yeah, and as we approach that milestone of 4 months of war, it looks that we're further from a solution than being closer to one, doesn't it?
Well, we always hope for a solution. Of course, ideally, the war should stop and the suffering should stop. But in the meantime, even though we cannot, of course, bring back the dead, we can help the living. And the UN has actually mounted a very fast and fast growing operation to help the population of Ukraine. We are now essentially working in all 24 administrative districts of Ukraine. We are now reaching more than 8 million beneficiaries, which is quite considerable considering that the lead time to this operation was very short. And so in sort of historical terms, this was actually an unprecedented operation in UN's history, with so many agencies scaling up their operations very quickly and reaching more and more people. But of course, it's still a very difficult and a very a very grim situation overall. And of course, there's no end in sight, or at least it seems that there's no end in sight, at least for the moment. Even though, of course, we here at the UN, and of course every Ukrainian, I'm sure, hopes for some sort of a solution and for an end to this nightmare, which will soon, celebrate, or celebrate would probably be the wrong word to use, but mark it's another grim milestone.
Indeed. Mr. Janowski, thank you very much for your time. Kris Janowski,